These days, when many people leave the house, they carry pepper spray or something of the sort. It's something nearly everyone has, and they don't leave their house without it. It's like leaving your house without your keys or your wallet, especially in the times that we live in. But what happens when a crime is committed that pushes people, including college students, to go out and buy firearms for their security and safety? Let that sink in. College students carrying deadly weapons. Well, today's case led to just that. After 19-year-old Brianna Denison, a child psychology sophomore at Santa Barbara City College, went missing from her friend's house in Reno, Nevada, it was like everyone's worst fear coming to life. Can you think of anything worse than being abducted in the middle of the night from a place that was like home to you? Well, as the investigation unfolded, more and more depraved things came out and set everyone on edge. The mind-boggling case of Brianna Denison has all of the elements of a winter break gone wrong. Fear, violence, and a tragic, fatal outcome. Welcome to True Crime Stories. I'm your host, Ty Knotts, and if you're into true crime documentaries like this, consider subscribing. It's free and it just keeps you up to date with all my future videos. Brianna Denison, affectionately known as Bree, was born on March 29th of 1988 to parents Jeff and Bridget. She also had a younger brother, Brighton, and the Denison family was small and tight-knit. Her dad was a businessman, and the family was living comfortably in Reno, Nevada. But their happiness was short-lived, because in 1994, when Bree was only 6 years old, her father Jeff tragically took his own life after his business was being investigated for federal embezzlement. This was a very hard blow for the Denison family. Jeff was only 34 years old, and he made such a tragic decision that left the family understandably ruined. But the shaken family picked itself back up and became each other's pillars of support. Bridget, Bree, and Brighton were very close, and they had an amazing and loving relationship. Bridget was a working single mom, and she worked super hard to make sure that her children got everything they ever wanted. Growing up, Bree was a very outgoing and a bright young girl. Soon after the Denison family dynamic fell to pieces after Jeff's tragic passing, the family moved to Bridget's native town, Mendocino, California, and Bree was very happy with the change. Bree was the type of person to mingle with anybody, and this was the very ability of hers that made her approachable and very likable. Bree attended Reno High School, from where she graduated in 2006. And when it came time for college, Bree wanted to study child psychology, so she enrolled in Santa Barbara City College in California. And at the time of the case, she was a sophomore. Anyone who knew Bree knew that she had chosen the perfect major. But one thing about Bree was that she loved traveling. She'd first gotten a taste of traveling when she studied abroad in Rome, Italy for a year. After that, Bree made countless trips all over the globe, visiting Hawaii, New York, Mexico, Jamaica, Japan, Italy, Egypt, Hungary, Austria, and even France. Bree lived in the moment, captured memories, and lived her best life, even though she was only 19 years old at the time. Her relationship with her brother Brighton was also a very heartwarming one. Bree was an amazing older sister who gave Brighton genuine and helpful advice. You know how people always run to their older siblings knowing that they have the solution to every problem? Well, that's exactly how Brighton looked at Bree. So by all accounts, Bree was a happy and sincere young woman who was thriving in college and had so much to look forward to. But in January of 2008, when she was back in Reno for winter break, something terrible happened, and it would be another devastating blow to the Denison family. January of 2008 was winter break for Bree, and she decided that she wanted to meet some high school friends back in Reno, Nevada. So she made plans with her friends to attend several events arranged by Summer Winter Action Tours LLC, which was a travel agency that catered to students. Bree and her friends also had plans to attend Martin Luther King Jr. weekend around that same time. So the evening of January 19th was very busy for Bree and her friends. They attended the events and had loads of fun at the concerts and other activities, including a party at the Sands Regency Resort, which is now known as J Resort on North Arlington Avenue. And before anyone knew it, it was late after midnight. Bree and her friends, Jessica and Katie, were staying at Katie's house near the University of Nevada. It was an off-campus apartment, located on McKay Court in Reno. Jessica had gone home early with an unknown guy way before Katie and Bree because she had to work the next day and wanted to be well rested. When Katie and Bree returned home, they changed into their night clothes and called it a night. Katie went up to her bedroom, but Bree wanted to sleep in the living room for some reason, so she made a bed on the couch with a pillow, 2 blankets, and a stuffed teddy bear. Now, for context, and this is important to note, the main glass-paned door of the house that the girls were living in was always unlocked. Not the safest thing if you ask me, but the reasoning behind it was that if any of the roommates lost their keys and no one was home, then they could easily get into the house. This was a terrible idea for all the obvious reasons, but no one ever said college students make the best decisions. Now, nothing bad had ever happened before, so the girls thought that they were safe. But just because nothing bad has happened before doesn't mean that it won't ever happen. And this mistake led to a harrowing outcome, one that would haunt the Denison family and Bree's friends forever. Phone records showed that Bree talked to her boyfriend Cameron that evening. The two had been dating since freshman year of college, so quite a while. The two had gotten into an argument on the phone about Bree going to college parties late at night, but after some time, everything was sorted out and Bree seemingly went to sleep. The following morning, on January 20th, at around 9 a.m., Jessica and Katie woke up and got ready for the day. They noticed that Bree was not on the couch, but they didn't think too much of it. The friends thought that maybe Bree had gone to her bedroom in the middle of the night, but they didn't check because everything seemed, well, perfectly normal. But after hours had gone by, Bree still hadn't emerged from her room, so the girls went to check up on her. But Bree was not in her room. In fact, it looked like she never went into her room at all. When Jessica and Katie went back to the living room, that was when they noticed something. One of the blankets was still on the couch, while the other was found far away from it on the kitchen floor that led to the back door. Bree's teddy bear was also missing, and the most alarming thing Katie and Jessica noticed was a red stain on Bree's pillow. Katie and Jessica immediately contacted Bree's mom, Bridget, and told her that Bree was nowhere to be found. Bree's phone, wallet, and purse were still at home, so where could she have gone without her belongings? A terrified Bridget called 911, and investigators immediately arrived at the scene. When the police checked the living room and the house, they noticed that nothing was in disarray, but since the front door was unlocked, their best bet was that Bree was probably abducted in the middle of the night, which is just awful to think about, but it was the most likely and most obvious scenario. The investigators zeroed in on the pillow, and there were many disturbing things about it. First of all, there were 3 red stains on the pillow, and there was mascara smeared on one side of the pillow. The police thought that maybe Bree had cried when she was arguing with her boyfriend on the phone. But how would that explain the alarming stains? Well, that would have to wait, because the detectives found something even more unsettling on the pillow upon closer examination. There were small indentations on it, which the investigators could only describe as bite marks. So Bree was not crying on the pillow, rather she was forcibly pushed down on it, probably to muffle her screams. The house was quickly taped off for forensic examination, and investigators managed to find traces of nail DNA on the doorknob and couch, and the DNA on the red stains on Bree's pillow tragically belonged to her. An investigation of Bree's disappearance was underway, and even the FBI joined in pretty early on. It was a confusing case. Bree had been abducted from a place where she thought she was safe, but now she was nowhere to be found. To add to the horror, there had been several brutal attacks on women in the same area over the last couple of months, so there is a distinct possibility that this was a serial assailant. First, the investigators checked the closest people to Bree, and the people who last spoke to or interacted with her. Those people included Bree's boyfriend, Cameron, and the man who gave Jessica a ride home. But both had airtight alibis, and their DNA ruled them out as suspects. Well, the detectives had no choice but to go after every lead they got. And 9 days after Bree's disappearance, a woman came forward on January 29th of 2008. According to the woman, she knew a friend who'd been attacked in the University of Nevada parking lot. She was quite tragically taken advantage of, but she couldn't see the perpetrator's face. All she could remember was that it was a white male and that he drove a blue pickup truck, possibly a 2007 or 2008 Toyota Tacoma. After the violent attack, the woman went to the police station, reported the crime, and got swabbed for DNA. When the investigators found this out, they wanted to match the DNA found on Bree to the DNA on this other woman to see if the crimes were committed by the same person. And lo and behold, it was a match. The person who attacked this poor woman was also the same person who had now abducted Bree. This was not the news Bree's family was hoping for, but at least it helped move the investigation forward. With this information, the detectives turned to the public and disclosed everything they knew, hoping for any possible lead in the investigation. Because of this, another woman also came forward who was also subjected to a violent attack in the same place in an eerily similar way sometime before Bree's abduction. Another detail that overlapped in both of these violent attacks was that the perpetrator had taken something as a trophy: the woman's underwear. To have a reminder of the twisted and violent attacks on an innocent and unsuspecting victim, that's just a different level of sick if you ask me. But this aside, the other woman had managed to catch a glimpse of the man's face, and a composite sketch was made to try to help find this man, and find Bree before it was too late. A huge search was conducted for Bree, which covered almost 100 square miles. Flocks upon flocks of people turned up to search for Bree, and amongst them was Nevada's First Lady, Dawn Gibbons, who was the wife of Governor Jim Gibbons. Since the previous two victims of this violent man were left alive, Bree's mom, Bridget, was still hopeful that her daughter would also be found unharmed and that she would return home. The investigators were also scouring through the list of violent offenders in the area from where Bree was abducted, but nothing came up. That was until February of 2008, almost a month after Bree's disappearance, when a discovery was made. On February 15th, an EE Technologies employee, Albert Jimenez, was out on lunch break at a nearby Subway restaurant in Reno. And as he was making his way back to work, he noticed something on the side of the street by a vacant lot, and it looked like a mannequin wearing bright orange socks. But we all know by now that these discoveries are never mannequins, and when he approached closer, his eyes finally registered what he was looking at, and it was a woman's body. He immediately rushed back to work and called the police. When the police arrived and they saw for themselves, they knew that it was bad. The body was also found with 2 pairs of underwear beside it. One of them was Bree's, but the other one couldn't be identified. But it didn't take long for the body to be identified as 19-year-old Bree Denison. When Bree's family found out about this, there was no amount of preparation that could equip someone to handle such a tragedy. This was everyone's worst nightmare, but now it was also reality. Bree's autopsy results were also downright chilling. She had endured a lot of injuries, and investigators believed she likely had her life ended by the killer's bare hands. But when investigators were sharing all of this news with Bree's family and friends, her friend Katie noticed something odd. One of the unidentified pairs of underwear found with Bree was hers. So it left everyone feeling unsettled about how the perpetrator managed to gain access to Katie's clothes. This meant that he must have been inside their home undetected, traveling from room to room in search of the perfect victim. Unfortunately, at this point, there were still no clues about who the perpetrator was. The Denison family wanted nothing more than to make this evil man pay, but it would take investigators more than 10 months before finally making a breakthrough in the case. So how did the detectives manage to find the person behind those violent attacks and Bree's murder? Well, someone close to this pig decided to rat him out, and it all started on November 1st of 2008. See, a woman confided in her best friend that she'd found multiple women's underwear in her husband's truck when they were coming back from Washington State, where the man took a job in March of that same year. The man's best friend, noticing the similarities between this instance and the widespread violent crimes, decided to turn the man in via the secret witness program. The man in question was 27-year-old James Michael Bila, who was originally a resident of Sparks, Nevada. He worked as a maintenance man and even a pipe fitter at one point. He also had a military background, but he was discharged for using illegal substances. He also had a blue belt in martial arts and had a very easily triggered temper. If that wasn't enough, he was also a married man and a father. Ironically, he was arrested while he was dropping his son off at Stepping Stones Children's Center in Reno on charges of murder, first-degree kidnapping, and sexual assault. But when he was questioned, James declined to give his DNA and denied any involvement in any of the crimes. The investigators knew that James wouldn't easily give in, so it was up to them to do some sneaky detective work. They asked James's wife to voluntarily hand over their son's DNA, to which she agreed. The results showed that a direct relative of the son had left his DNA at the house from where Bree was abducted, so the police now knew for sure that they had their guy. James's DNA also matched the traces found on Bree's body, as well as the other 2 victims. With this concrete evidence, the investigators were able to get an arrest warrant, as well as a warrant for James's DNA. And that was how James fell right into the trap that the detectives made for him. His wife, and incredibly his son, made his arrest possible. The investigators also dug into James's criminal record, and they found out that he'd been arrested in 2001 for threatening his girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. The police also managed to get a hold of James's blue truck, and it looked just like the one that the victim had described. He'd already sold the truck by this point, but luckily the investigators were able to track the truck down, and when forensic tests were run, fibers matching the clothes that Bree was wearing that night that she was abducted were found inside. James pleaded not guilty to the charges, as expected, and a trial was booked. If proven guilty, James was not only looking at a lifetime prison sentence with no parole, but also the death penalty. On March 12th of 2010, the trial began, and it lasted for about 15 days. The prosecution had heaps of evidence against this man, with coworkers, victims, and even James's own wife testifying against him. According to the prosecution, James was in the McKay Court area on January 20th and was just looking for someone to assault. He came across Katie's apartment, saw a sleeping Bree through the glass windows in the living room, and decided then and there that she would be his next victim. He easily gained access since the door was unlocked, overpowered Bree, and essentially abducted her and took her to a remote area in his truck where he ended her life so that he wouldn't get caught, but not before heartbreakingly forcing himself on her. The fact that Bree was found asleep when all of this began, I just can't even imagine the fear. James's boss also took the stand and said that James's behavior became more antsy and erratic after Bree's body was discovered. The boss even went on to say that when he asked James about Bree's body having been found, James responded by saying, quote, "She had it coming." But the thing is, she didn't. She was just asleep in her own home. How many mental backflips did this excuse of a man make in order to come up with something like this? But there's more. James's defense attorneys came up with a brilliant idea to paint James as a troubled man with a very sad and abusive past, as if that makes any difference. Your past can always provide context, but it is never an excuse for your actions. Moreover, the defense tried to persuade the jury to be lenient because James was a, quote, model inmate, whatever that means. In my book, model and inmate don't even go together in the same sentence. But finally, on May 27th of 2010, James was found guilty on all charges. What blew my mind is that on July 30th of 2010, just a couple months later, James was actually sentenced to death. Not saying he didn't deserve it, it just kind of shocked me a bit. But he also received 4 additional life sentences for the multiple accounts of assault and kidnapping of the 2 victims before Bree's attack and murder. These victims also took the stand in court, and not only did they each identify James in the courtroom, but when they were making their statements, one of the women demanded that James look her in the eye, but he refused. The bravery of this woman, it was incredible. She knew that she wasn't just doing this for herself, but also for Bree and the other victim. She knew that this was her last chance to get a word in against this man, and she let him have it. Because of her bold and courageous actions, as well as the other victim taking the stand, and the hard work of detectives, this man will never hurt anyone ever again. Following Bree's tragic passing, a vigil was held on February 23rd of 2008. The attendees wore blue clothing, which was Bree's favorite color, and flowers, notes, pictures, and ribbons were left by those who knew her, honoring the young 19-year-old woman who had so much more to live for and experience. In Nevada, Brianna's law was also implemented. The law states that all felons, regardless of the intensity of their crimes, had to provide their DNA for logging into a criminal database. See, James had been previously arrested in 2001, but his DNA was not in the system, and that caused Bree's case to drag on for almost a year before it was brought to completion. As for Bree's family, they're still heartbroken and devastated by this tragic loss. And if losing a husband and father wasn't enough, Bridget and Brighton now have to carry on with the weight of Bree's loss too. They're trying to move on, but to say that's difficult, well, those words are useless. It's so much worse than most of us are even capable of understanding. Following Bree's very high-profile case, the purchase of pepper sprays, safety devices, and weapons increased exponentially, especially in the University of Nevada area. And I mean, can you blame them? A serial assailant turned into a murderer and took an innocent life. Bree was somewhere that she felt was safe, but this tragic event left people feeling terrified and unsafe even within the four walls of their own homes, and even with their doors locked, all because one man had gruesome and unthinkable intentions. I just hope that after all these years have passed by, the Denison family was able to reach some level of closure. Bree's brother Brighton has managed to settle down, and he now has a 4-year-old son. But as for Bree's mother, we don't really know how she's been holding up, but I just hope that somehow she was able to make sense from all this and find some way to keep living her life. Because losing your husband is bad enough, but losing your daughter soon after, it's just too much. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. I wanted to give a special thank you to a couple channel members, including Dawn Thompson and Brittany Skurlock. If you also want to become a member of the channel, you'll gain access to new videos sometimes days or weeks before they're uploaded to the public, and it's one of the best ways you can help support the channel. I really appreciate all of you that have decided to do that, and if you want to join, you can click that big join button below the video or find the link down in the description. And we also have new True Crime Stories t-shirts available now as well, and that link's also down in the description. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered, and don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free and keeps you up to date with all my future videos. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.